the Executive Vice President and Chief Content Officer for Black Enterprise, Derek T. Dingle.
Well, Kirk, it's great to be here this morning with you.
Yes, sir.
And to have this conversation. First, I just want to congratulate you again.
Yeah, thank
for
you
your
again.
award last night.
A very, very special honor, and as I said last night, as I lost my words, humbled by the consideration and the recognition. So, really, really grateful.
Okay. Just wanted to go a little bit through your role at GroupM. GroupM, you lead 6,500 people. You have 17.6 million in media investment billings in the US and Canada. You control roughly 22% of market share. You have 50 leaders in tech, marketing, and media. Before we go into your journey, just want you to share, just to give the scope and magnitude of what you do, your responsibilities.
So you don't normally hear of GroupM. We are a part of WPP, that is our parent holding company, best described as the creative transformation company. And not because we want to give ourselves that distinction. We were awarded that by the Cannes Lions Festival. We've won more creative awards. We win more Cannes Lions for the creative work we do representing brands. And we represent some of the world's leading brands, Coca-Cola, Google, Unilever, and others. So you can just go down the list. My responsibility is North America. So we are about somewhere around $17 billion of the advertising dollars that are invested. When you think of WPP, and that parent holding company, it has creative agencies, it has PR agencies, consulting agencies. The GroupM division is the media arm, and that media arm spends more media dollars around the globe than anyone else. So to put it in practice, 1 in every 3 advertising messages you see on an outdoor billboard, hear on a podcast, see on TV, see on the internet, see on social media, 1 in every 3 is placed by us somewhere in the world.
Wow. Wow.
Right. So that's the company. You'd probably know our company brands. Ogilvy you've heard of Mediacom Mindshare, you've heard of Gray Advertising and others. All of those are part of the bigger holding company. And I'm at the GroupM network level.
Okay. Well, I want to explore your career journey to become one of the most powerful men in media.
I don't know if I'm that, but let's go.
Okay. Okay. Your career has been driven by two elements. One is curiosity, one is perseverance. How has that, how has your career journey using those 2 areas, driven your choices in terms of, the steps that you've taken to get to where you are today?
So, and I had a really interesting conversation this morning over breakfast with someone who was inquiring about the fact that they've got a young, a child of theirs that has just graduated and thinking about a career in marketing. And one of the challenges in the marketing and advertising career is that the paths are not linear. So there's no sort of clear starting point to clear end point. So I feel lucky that I was encouraged and was rewarded by pursuing my curiosity. So I got into the advertising industry really by accident. I was a student at City College. Honestly, I couldn't pay for my last semester. I started working a full-time job 2 days after graduating high school. I mentioned last night that we're part of an immigrant family that came here, and my sister was she was about to go to an away school, and we're 5 years apart in age, and I was on the 5-year plan at City College, no less, because I was spending way too much time shooting pool and hanging out. Real talk. So I didn't ever graduate and got this job because a black woman wanted to intentionally hire a person of color in her department. Now, I was fortunate. My curiosity at that point in my life already had me doing a little coding I was very familiar and comfortable around computers, so I got a job in this research department at then Condé Nast Publishing, right? So that's publisher for GQ and Vanity Fair and all these big lofty titles. And once I got in, I became fascinated with how influential magazines like a Black Enterprise and others could be in terms of shaping people's lives, shaping their preferences, shaping their cares, shaping their opinions. And this was just fascinating to me. And I started just digging in and trying to get more and more information. And that curiosity really has been the sort of navigation tool through my whole career after that, which is why are consumers so attached to the content, and then where do they find those content points? So consumers, content, and connections became the tool I used to figure out where I wanted to go next with my career. And just very fortunate, it led me early into digital, early into the internet, early into understanding social platforms, et cetera, and up until now.
Yeah.
And I think the perseverance part is, throughout that career, there are many moments where I wasn't in the room with anyone or anything that looked like me, and I didn't have a lot of images or models to follow. So it wasn't that I could look up and see someone 2 steps ahead or 3 steps ahead, and I want to remind everybody that's critically important. So I could look up and I could see a Ben Carson, and I could look up and I could see a Ken Chenault, but they were way, way, way far away. I mean, I looked up and I knew of an Earl Graves, but again, that doesn't help you when you're in your first job, except for the fact that it's a reminder that you can do it too. But you don't really have a path there, and I think the perseverance part is just, it's bred from this thing where I learned early that I shouldn't try to or aspire to be the smartest person in the room, but if I was committed to outworking everyone in the room, then I could get to stay in the room. So, that sort of hard work and perseverance is where that came from.
So you said you went through your career trajectory without mentors. What did you use to draw on in terms of direction, guidance, support system?
Yeah, and there were people that opened doors, but ongoing someone that I could check in with, I just didn't happen to have one. Now, what I had was a good support network. I had and remain just so close to my parents, right? My father passed a couple of years back in 2019, but between him and my mother, that was early on my support network, and then my wife became this new family member to that, which was when I was challenged. At home I was just still Kirk, and there was still like garbage to take out or regular stuff to do, but there was also in those environments this sort of affirmation of the fact that all the things that you're still to do are yours to do, and you can manage them, you can do them all. So there are many discouraging days, down days, but if you don't find the mentor, I still think you can create support networks. I heard it described yesterday as your counsel, who's your group of counsel, and I've tried to build those every chance I get. At different stages of my career, build my sort of board of directors of friend network that would be where I could actually bounce ideas and collect the information I needed to think about what I did next. And I don't think there's something amazing about my career other than I just stuck it out. Like I stayed determined. I couldn't afford to, honestly, get kicked out of the room. Not having a college degree added to that. So I knew that and felt convinced that the only reason I was staying was that I was earning my spot in the room. And that's a fighting imposter syndrome in another way, and even today probably still occurs for me. But for the longest time, I knew that I didn't have even a degree to fall back on because I just never finished. And then, you never get back around to going back to school to finishing it. So I was in these rooms where most of the people I was with, their parents were in country clubs, or they had low handicap in their golf scores, and or their parents were creating the connections for them, and we didn't have that. So I know the money I was making mattered. I know that I had more to do, and I just used perseverance and curiosity to navigate it.
Yeah, talk about the challenges as a black man in a very what has traditionally been exclusionary type of industry. You shared your experiences with me at at Time Inc. And dealing with that imposter syndrome. And you shared a specific moment that I think would resonate with the audience. Can you share that moment?
So all of us, deal with our different challenges. For me, mine was a lot of not believing that I'd done what was necessary to be where I was, right? So even after I went through the interview process and the selection process, and in some of the companies back then, the testing you had to do to get the job, I still felt like, there's going to be this moment they're going to walk in and go, oh, we made a mistake. You're not supposed to be here. So, true story, and I won't use any names, but, I chose sales as a path for that reason, right? So I got into a marketing job at Condé Nast first, and then tried to get into sales, because my theory was in sales, it felt like it democratized everything, right? As long as you produce, they're going to get over all the other things. So all I have to do is produce. And I started off well in sales, and I did pretty well. And in one of my first sales jobs, I was being recognized along with another colleague for winning the award. And we had our annual sales meeting, and we went off to Palm Springs. And this is early-ish, mid-90s. So we're in Palm Springs, and I've landed at the Ritz-Carlton in the Four Seasons in Palm Springs, which did not have a lot of people of color walking around as guests then. And from check-in, every move I made, I felt like the security guards, and I didn't feel like it. They were watching. Every elevator ride, somebody clutched their purse. Every hallway I walked down, someone's looking as if to say, why aren't you in uniform? What are you doing? Why are you using this entrance? So I've been dealing with that. And my colleagues, who probably felt very progressive, and they were, they felt very socially progressive. They had one black person on the sales team at the time, so that must have felt, and I don't know how they processed it, because I don't know there was intention in this, but we're at dinner, and they may have felt the tension of the place as well, and in an effort to diffuse it, I had a sales manager who, is a friend to this day and probably hasn't remembered or recognized that moment this way, but he decided that we're going to be disruptive in this five-star restaurant in the middle of the place by singing and making noise, and they're all getting drunk, and he says out loud across the table, hey Kirk, come on man, let's sing Rapper's Delight. You know the words, right? Come on Kirk, a hip hop, a hibbit to the hibbit, a hip, and here I am, and he's not aware, but I've been spending the last 2 days knowing I didn't belong, convinced that every eye told me I didn't belong. And somehow I'm sitting there going, no, I'm not going to do that. And he's just prodding me on, and now everyone's laughing. Now, they may have all felt they were laughing with me, but that's emotional. And, whether it's that vivid or the time I flew to Germany because I had international responsibilities for the launch of some international publications, and the notes that were sent to the driver to pick me up by the team that reported me was, pick up the black in German. That's all it said. Pick up the negro, pick up the black. It hits you hard that there's still all this microaggression and passive resistance, and it does hit you with that. And I'll tell you, those were times where, that Palm Springs night, dinner ended, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, which is 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I left the dinner, went outside, and called my mother, and that was my recharge, because if I didn't do that, I wasn't going to make it the next morning. And I got on the phone with her, I cried for 45 minutes, right? Because I knew I wasn't supposed to be there. They had been sending me the message I wasn't supposed to be there. And what she reminded me was, again, that same quote that you guys heard me say yesterday. And it's moments like that. You've got to find around you that network of people who are capable of giving you that support you need, I wasn't married then, so I called my mother, but now I have to call my wife, Get in trouble with this, gotta watch this stuff here, and then I'm in all types of trouble. Yeah.
So that's that basically what's ground you, your personal network, as opposed to your your professional network, which evolves, because
Yeah.
I know just ascending to this role, you have gone through, the rejection of sales job because you were in the research area. You got there, and then
The
eventually.
first sales job I went for, I was told, you're never going to be good in sales. Guy fell asleep on me in the interview. Nodded off, just nodded off, and then did not hire me in sales. So the same company that didn't hire me in sales was willing to hire me in marketing, though. What did it tell you? You see, the sales jobs are the face of the company. And because sales jobs are the face of the company, they actually want that face to look a lot like themselves because they didn't think they're the face of the company. So I couldn't get a sales job at Condé Nast because I didn't look like I could be in a GQ magazine or that I was anyone who dated anyone that was in Self, Mademoiselle, or Glamour, right? And I couldn't get a sales job at first when I first entered Ziff Davis. Now, I think it took somebody who was brave enough to kind of go, hang on a second, have you seen this guy in the room? He's kind of pretty compelling. And that's why I went from, this role in this international role into a sales role. And once I got into sales, I wasn't going to look back. But, there's that you have to face, and I'm just reminding you, just keep leaning forward and keep owning your steps and own your space in the room, right? Because we don't realize that this thing that we call white privilege is something that we actually grant others because we give them permission to take liberties with us that are not theirs to take. So if you actually own your space, then the space I occupy is mine. And I'm not telling you all of that's available early, but the minute it's available, hold on to it and then don't move back from it, right? So when I tried to do it early, I was called aggressive. When I tried to do it early, I was called arrogant. Sometimes those were bold enough to call me angry. Any of these sound familiar to some of you? All right, so all of us have heard that, right? But I'm telling you, don't stop owning your space.
Wow. Well, that goes hand in hand with another part of your mantra. You enjoy complex problems.
I love complex problems. The more complex, the better. Because, again, somewhere along this journey of trying to discover and figure out how I could create impact on the business that I was in, right? For the same reason I got in sales. If I can create business impact, I was on a panel in Cannes this year, and a colleague at one of our sister agencies said this on a panel, and this is really something to remember. Capitalism isn't racist. See, and that's one of the powerful messages I think that Black enterprise has in it that we have to hold on to. If you're making money, everybody gets over their issues with you. If you can help them make money. To Ben's comment, I forgot I didn't hear the name of the person who asked that last question, but she asked the question that says, how do you ultimately make progress? Which is that you show the business value for it, right? We should do things. We should have inclusion, equity, and diversity because it's the right thing to do. But capitalism cares about it, is it the profitable thing to do? So when you can actually bring those two together, so good for culture, good for business, that's where I think you're successful. I think that's bred into Black enterprise. Let's do the right thing, but let's also show that it can have powerful business impact. So yeah, this is part of what I've tried to figure out, which is don't try to be smarter than anybody else in the room, but if you turn behind you and no one's following you, you're not leading, right? So doesn't matter what title they give you, doesn't matter what degree you have. If you turn around and you don't have people following you, then you're actually not leading. You're running alone. You can choose to play the game that way. For me, I have a strong compulsion to make sure that I can bring some people with me. And in business, it's for business purpose. I want to bring together, though, that growth in business with what I know has been some of my superhuman powers and my secret sauce, which is my diverse perspective has allowed me to actually tackle some of the complex problems of business in a more innovative way than others. And that has been rewarding for the companies I've been a part of. And if I keep doing that, then I keep owning more of my space in the room. I keep having the ability to get on stages like this and speak my full truth and be on boards of public companies that welcome my perspective and my opinion. So,
and that's how you have gotten your teams to follow you, is to
You know, the thing that, you know, we do well, and, you know, and by we I mean people who come from sort of stress or come through adversity is we tend to adapt, we tend to move around, right? When things press on us because we don't have anywhere to go, we morph and change ourselves. Now, you know, I was on a conversation last week and someone was talking about the importance of your personal brand, your professional brand, and is it fear that we have to code switch? You know, after George Floyd, don't we have time now where we can just say to our colleagues, hey, we don't want to code switch anymore. I want to be me all the time. And my response to that is find your source code. And if you find your source code, it's not code switching, right? Because if you know what your principles are, you know what you believe in, then you adjust to the situations you're in, and you adjust because your goal is to have impact. See, there's no point to say, you know, well, I was in the room for a little bit, then they kicked me out. Don't get kicked out of the room, stay in the room. Own the spot in the room. When I made that call to my mother that night, she reminded me this wasn't just about the paycheck. She reminded me I had to stay and endure it because I was supposed to be there to change. And if I'm supposed to be the change agent, then I got to figure out how to process what I was getting, turn it into something that would make me stronger, and stick it out. Same thing applies today. How are you taking that and holding on to your source code, your authentic self, but then expressing it in a way where you create followership, where people go, you know what? That thing that he's doing is working, why aren't we doing more of it? The thing that they've led, they meaning the team that we've created is working. You know, the success of the business I'm in is tied to us getting people all rallied around this idea that collectively, together, they can accomplish things that any one of them individually would say is not possible. And if we can keep that sort of motivation going, the success is the team success. And then you build on top of that, and you affirm the team, and then you go forward with that. So, you know, again, there's no wood, but, you know, feel blessed that I've been able to do some of that through this point, and hopefully I've got some more to do.
Part of leadership is having the vision, seeing something that others didn't see. You were an early adopter of the digital space. You came in the early 90s. What drove you there, and why did you claim that? What made you decide to claim that space to advance in the media industry?
So, like I said, I tripped into the media industry because I didn't finish. I owed City College 9 credits, and I didn't have the money to pay for it. I took the classes, I just didn't have the money to pay for it. And a friend of mine had gotten this interview and this job, and he wasn't going to take it. And the manager, who's a black woman, said, you know, I'm not hiring in somebody like what HR is sending me. I want a black person to come in. And she reached out, and she knew another person in accounting who knew somebody, and said to me on the weekend, hey, there's this job. If you show up on Monday at 9 o'clock, it's yours. And I showed up and I got it. So there was no plan here. But I very early on realized that magazines, then newspapers, all were how people's opinions formed, right? How you could actually shape thought, create aspirations for a community, bring people together, set them apart, and I became fascinated with that. Everything about early adoption after that was me pursuing what I thought was going to be the next tool or technology that was going to be a platform for media. So I became entrenched in print publishing, but then, you know, started learning a lot about TV and radio. And then, you know, in 1995, 1993, 94, you know, people were beginning to play around with CD-ROMs, and people were creating gaming communities, and that was just fascinating to me, so I wanted to learn more there. And then this thing called the internet was out there, and 1996, Netscape launches the browser. 1997, the internet is being used by people. There are only like 100 websites, and I'm like, this is interesting, and I followed it. So it was things like that, and again, I remember when, you know, when Google called up and we didn't know what Google was, and people were talking about that. And I remember when Facebook came along, and I feel fortunate to have a front row seat now to how most of these platforms have emerged, and to be in the conversations with them about, you know, how they're going to create platforms both for media consumption, but how advertising underwrites that. Because whether we accept it to be true or not, the funding mechanism for most media is advertising, right? So advertising holds a tremendous responsibility in sort of shaping culture, right? And then we in the advertising industry tap into a bunch of ideas and tools to do that. It's why it's so important that we recognize now and finally give credit for how, you know, Black voices and our Black culture has been a big part of shaping storytelling for advertisers. See, because we've always been on the edge of innovation in music and art. That's just part of what our culture is, because we're not the norm. We're the thing that's innovating on the norm. And that's exactly what makes one commercial or one story of a brand different from another, is their ability to tap into those stories and bring that to life in a media platform in front of an audience. And all that, to me, I would do that for free. I find it all interesting, and unfortunately I don't have to do it for free, which is the good part.
You say that advertising is about storytelling, but you said the industry hasn't been very good in terms of telling its story. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the advertising industry picks up brands and tells a brand story in terms of, you know, why is one toothpaste the toothpaste dentists recommend versus another, right? And there's a lot of work that goes into that. There's a lot of work that goes into your believing that one beverage is better than another, one car is better than another. And the tools used have to borrow from, sometimes plain outright steal from, culture around it to do that. But the actual industry that does this doesn't tell a story of itself. And that's why one of the reasons I think the industry has remained homogenized, right? It's kind of all the same people doing it. But that's beginning to become stagnant. The stagnancy of that is, you know, it was captured in the series Mad Men, where, you know, it's just this very male, very pale, you know, cigarette smoking type of these idea guys. And that's really not what the industry is today. The industry today relies on data, it relies on creativity that comes from all different voices. And we need more of those voices. So it is a time to celebrate the advertising industry. It's finally beginning to allow those voices to shape the way we tell these stories for brands. Most brands now are insisting that the teams that work on their business are as diverse as the audiences they speak to. And I'm excited that that's where we are. That's progress. It doesn't mean we've won. It just means it's progress. Because the companies now that we win business with ask us to show them a team that is as diverse as the audiences they go after. And as America browns and changes, that gets to be pretty important for the companies to have bred into their, not just their, you know, corporate principles and philosophies, but actually into their cultures.
Well, in your role as CEO of GroupM, you want to drive those diverse voices. One of the areas that has been a major challenge for Black-owned media and has been gaining, you know, advertising dollars, especially from advertising agencies, basically been locked out. You know, the $170 billion spent, you know, Black-owned firms gain less than 1% of that. And when I talk about Black-owned firms, I mean Black Enterprise, Blavity, Revolt. I don't mean BET, which is, you know, a Black focus, but it's a white-owned firm.
Yeah.
You did something, pretty revolutionary. I want you to talk about that.
The Media Inclusion Initiative.
Yeah, the Media Inclusion Initiative. Tell us how that came about. It has two components. One is the 2% plus pledge and Diverse Voices Accelerator. Yeah. How did you develop that? How did you come up with that measurement of 2% as the floor?
Sure.
And share how that evolved.
Sure. So so advertisers have long realized that they need to speak to multicultural audiences and have multicultural budgets for that reason. So they segregate their budget and they will say, look, we want to be intentional enough so that this doesn't ever get compromised in an effort to get lower rates or get greater reach with our dollars we want to separate out a budget that is targeted at multicultural voices, multicultural audiences. So Hispanic audiences, Black audiences, you name it, right? So I'll fit into that. And that's been a good initiative. And our agency or family of agencies within GroupM all have realized through our own research and just study of the space that, again, this needed to be supported. So we did things like the New Majority Ready Coalition, recognizing that, we're getting to a point where there's going to be some, 15 high teens to low 20 states where people who are Black and brown will become the majority in those states in the next few years. So we built a coalition of advertisers who wanted to make sure they spoke to those audiences. And then we built out this thing called multicultural marketplaces, the way you buy media. You don't always buy from single properties, but you buy from a group of properties in a marketplace. We'd build them out where we'd aggregate inventory from different media properties to do that. And all of this was to get to audiences. What was neglected in this, though, was that we would get to the audiences, and there are more Black and brown and Latina people consuming social media on TikTok and Facebook than in any one single Black-owned property. So if the companies were getting to the audiences, they may be accomplishing that, but we're not finding a right way to support the voices because context matters, ownership does matter, but that wasn't happening. I want to credit people like Butch, I want to credit people like Byron Allen at Allen Media Group, I want to credit people like Devontae over at Revolt and others who kept raising their hand and saying, hey, we're not getting an intentional commitment to us. And it's not about fair share, it was just an intentional commitment that doesn't get diluted with the efforts at efficiency in media, because that's what media looks for, it looks to become efficient. So how do we set aside something that is intentional and supports our ability to keep telling those stories? And so I didn't do that, Butch did that, right? So Butch comes in and pushes that agenda. Now, I feel fortunate I was in a seat to hear that and say, we aren't done if we've done New Majority Ready and Multicultural Marketplace, we need something else. And from that was birthed the Media Inclusion Initiative and the Diverse Voices Accelerator program for us. So if we represent 22% of all the dollars in this market, what could we do to intentionally put 2 or more % of those dollars into Black media companies, right? And then the next focus is Latin and others, so, or Hispanic and others. So that's the intentional purpose so that those dollars don't get compromised. Those dollars don't ever get pulled away and diluted into the effort at media efficiency. The Diverse Voices Accelerator recognizes that now, not everybody is Butch and Black enterprise. Not everybody already has sort of, broken the inertia of startup and as a 40-year-old property, some are just, influencers on social media. Some are just creating their content, they're trying to put it out. So how do we support those Black voices as well, or those diverse voices as well? And those two things make up the Media Inclusion Initiative. And we've got, a bunch of our advertisers that said, we'll sign up to do that. So we're already thinking we're getting to audiences, but target. We want to speak to Black owners and make sure Black owners can keep telling that story. And they've stepped up, and they're well beyond, I hope they're okay with me sharing this, but they're comfortable that they're well beyond 2%. They're going to do that. And other brands that are committed to it. Now, I'll talk about the ones that were in the press release, like Coca-Cola, Target, Unilever, and others that have said we're going to do that. And they've gone to press with it about it, and we're committed to setting now, even in some of those partnerships where we have a historical precedent of that much spend, have set targets that we're going to work with those Black media companies to achieve as we work forward together. As well as we ourselves as sort of the agent, because we sit in the middle. We don't have an advertising to run for ourselves, but decided that we'd commit some of our dollars as well to the accelerator to make sure that we can help accelerate new voices.
So are you pleased where you are now, and where do you want to go, and how do you make sure that this initiative is sustainable?
I'm Jamaican, I'm never satisfied.
Okay.
So I'm not pleased with where I am. I'm pleased that we've made progress, and we have a lot more to do. But we've made progress. We've broken our inertia. We're not just talking about it. We have something that's running. It's better this year than it was last year. It's significantly better than it was 2 years ago, and it exists, and it didn't 5 years ago. So that's progress. So am I pleased that we've made progress? Yes. Am I satisfied with where we are? No. But none of our clients are either. Those clients want now to see the positive impact of this. Like I said, it's got to be good for culture, but it's got to be good for business.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to sustain itself. It'll be an initiative, right? And it will only last until it has proof points. When it becomes a proof point, then it will become a platform and it will be stable. So I want the Media Inclusion Initiative to just become natural. It's ubiquitous. It's what we do because we create the proof points behind it. So that's the next wave of work that we're going to now do, is prove that by doing this, these companies are winning disproportionately against others who have not stepped up to do this level of commitment. And we'll do that in partnership with everyone, with you and anyone else that we've partnered with to stand up the program.
And then, once again, just to clarify, how many companies are engaged? Is it, at one point it was 20, is it still at 20? And
No,
now
no, it's well over 40 and
Yeah.
it grows every day.
Yeah.
2 more emailed me over the weekend because, you know, business has had a little bit of a herd culture, right? So no one wants to be the one to run out first. Everyone's a little afraid. So the reason we did press on it was if you saw that 28 companies would do it, others would follow. And 28 became 32, and 32 became 37, and now we're well into the 40s, and I think we'll just keep growing. That's why I said I'm not pleased. I'm pleased with progress, but we're getting there, right? So over this weekend, I've got 2 more that are going, hey, what are we doing? And the more we can highlight the success these companies are having, the more other companies are turning around and saying, what do we need to do different? Just remember, the mentality of the companies considering this is, if we're getting to our audiences successfully and our media is efficient, what is the value of changing and doing something intentionally different than what we're doing? And we're showing them that by being this intentional, you can actually create more positive impact on your business overall. So we're getting there, and like I said, more work to do.
And speaking to multiple audiences.
You were told we weren't going to ignore that clock. So
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
pointing the
Okay.
clock out.
Okay.
Tina, you heard
Yeah.
I did that, right?
Yeah.
All right, good.
Okay. So we're going to take some questions at this point. Let me see.
Stun them to silence.
How are you, sir? My name is Larry Robinson. I'm the CEO of Kazukian. We're based out of Memphis, Tennessee, a podcast network of about 24 shows, produce a lot of stuff. I've often wondered, how can we be a better partner for some of the entities like yourself? We've had a difficult time breaking in through, mainstream advertising and getting those dollars funneled through our shows that we're producing. Even the production opportunities, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on a company our size, how we can level up to be much more of a better partner for some entity like GroupM.
Yeah. Thanks for your question. So the challenge for us becomes working with every partner is about the same load on the system. That's the problem, right? So whether I work with a partner that I spend $1 billion a year with, or I work with a partner that I spend $5 million a year with, the amount of time I put into the contract negotiation, the terms of negotiation, reporting and monitoring of the business is about the same. So it is inefficient for me to work with thousands of $5 million accounts, and it's more efficient for me to work with a single $1 billion account. So you can imagine when you're investing on behalf of your clients and you yourself aren't allowed infinite, we're not allowed to run it as a non-for-profit, we have to find margin too. It naturally gravitates to the 80-20 rule, sometimes the 98 to 2% rule, which is, why don't you just work with the scale players? As big as you are without that scale, the strength of the idea and what you're doing has to break through into our environments. Sometimes that's more successful with examples through 1 or 2 brand partners that you can pick up. We've now staffed up intentionally around this, so I have someone who heads supplier diversity for me. Her name is Cynthia Jenkins, and again, if you come in through us, you'll get to her, and Cynthia, and she works for a guy named Gonzalo Del Fa, and they have a team now that is trying to do a better job, now, we're not done yet, Derek, but a better job of finding partners like you, because our brands are beginning to ask for them. You know, the typical question from every brand, whether FedEx here, Fidelity here, when you work with your media partner, you often turn around and say, bring me something never been done before, bring me something innovative. You know, we will find innovation when we find people like you, and we're pushing that through our system now so that we're looking for you as much as you're looking for us. But just realize, breaking through is that scale issue. It's a hard thing. I'm not telling you that we've got it figured out, but we're trying our best.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next question.
Yes, thank you both for this session here. My name is Guy Anglade. I'm with one of the platinum sponsors here. I just had a question about social media versus television and just the reach. Like, I know you can spend less and still reach a lot more than with television. I just wanted to hear your perspectives on that. Is that actually true? How impactful is social media versus television, which is what we had before social media began?
So this will sound like an election year answer, because I'm not going to answer your question the way you want it answered. And the reason is that it's both, and it's neither one, because it matters on what you're trying to do. So for big known brands that want to launch and create big impact and want an aggregated audience around sports, they're going to still want to advertise in the Super Bowl. And you'll see successful ads launch around doing that, and that's TV. However, other marketer says, look, I specifically need to sell my product to someone who has had a bad experience with my competitor's product, and I want to know that I'm being efficient with my marketing, so I'm conquesting someone who is using my competitor's product, and I want that person to see how my product is better than my competitor's product. Social media becomes, or digital becomes, such a different tool, because now I can use data to enrich the targetability of that ad, right? So all of you know and have seen ads follow you for something you're looking for. That's doable with digital because I use data to inform the delivery of the ad at a moment in time to a specific person. And I can customize the ad anonymously, but I can customize the ad to gender, race, socioeconomic background, you name it. And that can help me now get a message to you to contemplate not using that insurance company or not using, you know, that overnight service versus using mine. And that's a different thing than what I may want to do in TV or what I might want to do in the gentleman's before's podcast, where I want a close association with a trusted source like him who gives an endorsement for it. So it isn't either or. People are finding greater efficiencies in digital right now because right now there's so much inventory that the prices for buying it are less expensive, but there's some things that come along with that are challenging. So, you know, so I hope that didn't sound too much like a yes and no, but that's really what the answer is.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
No.
Hey,
no.
Kirk. Butch Graves from Black Enterprise.
Oh, man.
Had a two-part question.
Yes, sir.
Loved the story that you told. When I say loved it, but could feel the same pain, the story you told about at the Ritz-Carlton, what have you, and taking that and how that shaped you. But I wonder, the questions are unrelated, but the first part of the question is, and I don't know if everyone understands just the position this brother has at GroupM. So he's the chairman of probably the world's largest, or one of the world's largest ad agencies. So everybody reports to him. And so it must be surreal at times when you're there and you look around and you realize, do all these people, when I come to visit your office, I always look around and say, I wonder if all these people here know that they report to a brother. Right? And so, is there ever a time when you step out of your office, you look around and you see all this sea of white and brown and sometimes black people there, and recognize that you're actually the person in charge? That same feeling you had felt of isolation when you're in the hotel, you have isolation in a different way now because you're actually the person in charge of all of it. Just share for a moment, if you will, you know, do you ever have that kind of aha moment sitting when you're there in your office?
So you're going to do to me what happened last night. You're going to do it on stage. I shared a moment with you yesterday Well, I just thanked you. And I'm going to do it publicly now because the importance of having other pictures like this is something that I think I forgot, and I got reminded last night. How energizing a room like this is, how affirming it is, because you do spend a lot of other time not in rooms like this. And when you're not, you kind of build up the scar tissue to work your way through it. You build up the scar tissue where someone actually goes to the HR department and reports you for doing something that you see your colleagues do all the time. And you're like, I'm going through a what over saying what? I didn't raise my voice. I naturally have a baritone speaking voice. I didn't raise my voice in a meeting. And I gotta explain that my communication style is truly not any different than anybody else's communication style. So yeah, it's there all the time. And if you let it, it'll actually haunt you. But I don't most of the time. What I do is I find places to recharge. This has been recharging. Thank you for Black Men Excel for what you do. Thank you for Black Enterprise for creating this network and these connections. All of you went through this right after George Floyd. You suddenly had colleagues call you up and go, I didn't know. And they didn't realize that even when they called you and said that, they weren't actually sharing empathy with you. They were pulling again from you and creating a burden on you to actually make it okay that they didn't know, when all the evidence had been there all along. And they didn't realize they were doing that, and you knew they were doing something else that was yet still another drain on you, and you had to go through that. And it wasn't until you got by yourself, and I mean now we are by ourselves, for you to sometimes get your recharging. So yes, it happens, but equally, just as Black Enterprise has stood out in the forefront, willing to say out loud the things that are necessary to change the face of business, we have a greater responsibility than just the needs of ourselves to, in these moments, stay in the room, hold our ground, occupy our space. It is right for business, and critically, it's right for culture. So, my brother, thank you.
Thank you. Second part, and I was listening to the brother beforehand, Larry, who spoke to you or asked this question. I'm asked this all the time by, smaller Black content producers, right, that are trying to get through the door. But it would be helpful if you went a little bit more into detail about the specific initiative that GroupM has really has championed, right, and done not just a lip service job, because a lot of corporations after George Floyd had a knee-jerk reaction to make announcements, right? We are putting $100 million towards fighting racial equity.
Yep.
$500 million to do this, and I said, so people asked me today, I said, I'm not even the CEO of Black Enterprise, I'm the Chief Accountability Officer to corporate America. I want corporate America to live up to what it said. But you guys are doing this with GroupM, but there's the small content producers are still, they're challenged.
Yep.
But the real challenge is scale, right, at the end of the day, because you still have to answer to a client who's asking you, tell me where, we put this money in, what's our ROI on this?
That's right.
So can you just go a little bit more into detail about, the initiative, the 2% initiative and what's taking place there and
Sure.
people coming through the door that you said to go to Gonzalo and the other lady.
And Cynthia.
Cynthia.
Sure. So, and thanks again for that. So, you asked this, and I realized I didn't answer the question. Why a percentage and not a dollar amount? Because every year budgets change.
Yep.
So, you see, I can always say 100 million, but, then when what happens at $100 million and one? You see, and because $100 million can get spent in a year, then what happens the year after? So we don't want that. We've asked clients to simply say, get to 2%. When you actually add up all of the inventory, this is buying as an asset. The asset is eyeballs. So every single marketer is competing for reach, number of times, so how many times, and how much time I can get a consumer to look at my ad. So reach, frequency, and duration of time spent looking at an ad they're putting in front of you. That is a spot on TV. It is 15 second or 30 in traditional TV. On social media, it could be a 3-second to 6-second spot. It's a banner that floats on a page or pops on your mobile device. But all of those, that's the inventory. If you amass all of the inventory, most of it is owned by publicly traded companies. Therefore, private owned stops and drops quickly to below 3% to 4%. Okay. So once you get into private owned companies and then you get down to past women owned and other owned and all the way down to black owned, less than 1% of all the inventory available is owned by black, all right? We figured double that is the least you should do to intentionally try to turn this around. Because if you don't try to turn it around, they can't grow. You see, one of the things that holds back those companies and prevents them from competing is they don't have the cash capital to fund and buy marketing to drive their own businesses so that their inventory can grow so they have more to sell, right? So it's like the system itself isn't really designed to fix it for the entrepreneur, the startup person. Now, a lot of the platforms have launched programs to help voices, different voices, influencer voices, black voices, Hispanic voices, et cetera, build up. So they've got their versions of doing that where individual creators can start getting some support. For us, we wanted to partner in that as well, but we knew that some of those needed cash. So the two aspects of the program are double up on what is, we think, up the approximate pool of available inventory and keep it as a percentage. As the minimum you want to do if you want to be intentional about helping black media owners grow their content properties, because we believe that their perspective is important. Because without their perspective, you can cover business, but you don't cover business like Black Enterprise covers business, right? So we invited advertisers to that, and the minimum is double of what we think their share of inventory could be to start and keep building from there. For the Digital Voices, for the Diverse Voices Accelerator, now this is just write the check. Just write the check and invest in these brands or invest in these startup companies. Let's figure out how we can help them create distribution connections. Let's figure out, can we partner them with other media partners that we're already working with? Some of them just need upfront money, and can we do that? And do we have partners who are willing to do that as well? Because when you buy media, you have media falls into many categories, but you sort of have paid for and then, sponsorships. And one is measured against and held to standards of accountability that in and of themselves have, been built up in a time where they reward you for your scale. They reward you for things that you would have historically had to have been doing over the last 10 or 15 years. You could argue then that very same measurement mechanism discriminates against you if you haven't already been winning at it, right? Yeah. So I don't want to call the names of any of the measurement companies, but that is the challenge, and we sort of have to tackle all of that to get this turned around. That's why I said I'm not celebrating where we are. I'm not happy with where we are. I'm happy about the progress we're making, and I'm happy that our clients are beginning to see proof of the fact that this is rewarding them. Their employee bases are more satisfied that they're living their promise of the brand of being inclusive, creating equity, and being more diverse organizations. I intentionally reverse that order all the time because I think it starts with inclusiveness to get to diversity. So those brands and those companies are seeing their employee base support them. They're getting better reaction from some customer sets, and some of them are beginning to already see where they're opening up new audiences just because of this intentional behavior. So we just want to keep validating it with data now to make it work. So
fortifying the black-owned media, both established and new and startups, as well as giving your customers new clients, new business. Yeah.
Ultimately, if we don't deliver what they want, they'll find another partner, right? So, and then all of what we're trying to do doesn't go anywhere. So it's got to make, it's got to make business sense as well. And we're making sure that our efforts here at supporting diverse voices, black voices, is not simply, a for cause thing. It's that too, but it's also got to be for business.
Okay.
All right.
I think we're at this point we're out of time. But you know what? I'm going to let you have one quick question before we leave.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions, but just to keep it simple, my name is Rodriguez with Prudential, Rodriguez Barnett. So just to kind of cap things off, you talked about a lot, and I'm curious to know as far as thought leadership and content. I feel like not all black content is good content. So just from your perspective, what type of content are you looking for that you see potential that we can own when it comes to that? Like one example is that I saw Woman King, which I thought was a great movie. And then, I think there's also like the Black Panther movie that's coming out. Do you feel like content like that is something that we are capitalizing on, that if we support, it's going back to the black communities, it's going back to our initiatives and our agenda?
Again, this is going to sound like the earlier question, and I'd love to find you afterwards and keep this conversation going, but the shortest way for me to answer this is the value of content, or what is good content, shouldn't be always judged by a small panel of people that have money to invest in it. That's bad. And everything about the way content is being consumed now is validating that, if you can create your story and you can create a following, that following will grow for you. I don't want to limit any creator, and I definitely don't want to limit black creators. So you should create, and since now that distribution is getting a little democratized, put your story out there, and if you can create followership, you should. I do have a personal opinion that says, we could use more things that do more affirming of our history, more affirming of values, more affirming of self, but that's a personal preference. But if you're a content creator, black, Hispanic, whatever, and you want to create other stuff, you should. You have the right to do that, and we shouldn't do anything to hinder your ability to do that going forward. But when we are looking at partnership, what we're looking at is, do you have an audience following? And is there a chance that an audience will follow you? Because inevitably, we have a marketer who probably wants to talk to that audience. And if that marketer can understand the relationship that you as a creator have with that audience, and can play a part in it that's authentic and natural, then the brand could actually get some brand value from being around you or supporting you as a creator and the audiences that follow you. So that's the business we're in, which is how do we get a brand to tell a story in a place where the consumer wasn't necessarily expecting that story but can be influenced by that story. So if you're a creator and you can actually create a following, the first brother to talk about his podcast is the challenge, because that following needs to get to a critical scale for us to usually bring a brand along, because those brands are buying, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. But I don't want to box our creators into anything, because that would be, not only would be limiting, we're going to miss something. We're going to miss something valuable that way. Anyway.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, Kirk, thank you very much for this exciting, insightful conversation. Let's please give media visionary Kirk McDonald a round of applause.